Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me. It's a great pleasure to have you today and welcome you to this automotive industry updates here on Ubilo, live on Ubilo every second Tuesday of the month. And we're keeping the same format as usual, which is 2 topics, 1 guest, and your questions. So the 2 topics for today, well, we're going to be, first of all, talking about the federal election and specifically its impact on our campaign, the Your Car, Your Data, Your Choice campaign. Our second topic today will be to discuss the recent announcement from the BC government on skilled trade, and again, what's going to be the impact of this announcement on the automotive aftermarket. But before we begin, I'm going to ask Callie, as usual, who's hiding in the background, monitoring the chat, to run a regular poll. So we're going to be able to get a sense of who's joining today, whether or not it's your first time on Ubilo, you've been here before or not, what portion of the supply chain do you participate in, and where are you located geographically. So I'm going to let, again, Kelly run the poll. And while we do that, we're going to take a quick second to acknowledge today's sponsors. Sergo, thank you very much. And so the results are in. So, we have a few newcomers, but most of you have been here before. Most people are from Ontario, Quebec. Moving to our first topic, again, the impact of the federal elections on our Your Car, Your Data, Your Choice campaign. Back in November 2020, seems like yesterday, but that's when we launched the Your Car, Your Data campaign here in Canada. We did it in partnership with our partners south of the border, AIA and Auto Care Association. And the goal of the campaign really was to secure regulations on access to vehicle data. For that plan to obviously succeed, we launched a new website. We recruited industry champion and sponsor. And you'll recall we also launched a petition on change.org that essentially asked the Minister of Industry, Science and Economic Development, that's a mouthful, to ensure Bill C-11, that's the law that is going to change the Privacy Act, that this bill would include sector-specific regulations on access to vehicle data for the aftermarket for the connected car. And so this was the goal. You recall it was Minister Bain when we first launched the campaign back in November. There was a change of minister, Minister Champagne. Again, no family link here. Change ministry, and we continue to send the petitions to Minister Champagne in the hope, again, that C-11 going through Parliament would give us some regulatory framework to ensure we continue to have access to the information we need to fix cars. Now, the reality, C-11 is not going to become law. Once the federal government called the election, any outstanding bill that is currently in the House of Commons will essentially die, including C-11. And we're going to need to have the next government reintroduce these bills or not. There's no guarantee that a returning Liberal government would necessarily reintroduce the bill as is. Obviously, a changing government might take a different position, but essentially our campaign focused on Bill C-11 or Minister Champagne or Minister Bain, obviously, is going to be kind of moot. But our efforts were not in vain. So don't be discouraged about the fact that, we've pushed all our efforts to mobilize the industry, because these efforts really have counted towards advancing our goals. We've seen the overall issue of access to information, data, and right to repair become an increasingly known issues, not just in industry, but by the general public. Australia, as you heard, recently adopted its own right to repair legislation for the automotive sector. In the US, just recently, President Biden also signed an executive order on right to repair, directing the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, to also look into right to repair. And again, it's not just about vehicle, it's about consumer goods, electronics, and so on. And just to illustrate all these recent changes and its impact it had on Canadian politicians here, I'm going to show you a quick video. It's about a minute long, and it's going to have three people speaking. The first one is someone giving you a quick update of what happened in the US in terms of the FTC and the US. But that's going to be followed by two Canadian politicians. Brian May is a member of Parliament. He recently introduced a bill in the House of Commons. Again, that bill is not going to pass through because of the election. But his bill was intended to modify the Copyright Act to allow for essentially a company to be able to reverse engineer product for the purpose of repair and maintenance of goods and products. And his bill, he's going to talk about it. He obviously speaks specifically about right to repair. And thirdly, you're going to hear the counterpoint from the opposition. Pierre Poilievre, a prominent conservative, will also answer back to MP Brian May, but also supportive. And what you realize through this, it's an issue that is essentially getting a lot of bipartisan support. So let's have a look to that video.
The White House is also encouraging the Federal Trade Commission to create rules around right to repair. That would effectively end manufacturing restrictions on access to parts, repair guides, and software needed to make repairs on everything from cell phones to cars, medical devices, farming and military equipment.
I hope this legislation also kicks off a conversation about the right to repair in Canada. This issue is nonpartisan. It spans the corners of urban and rural citizens alike. It protects consumers, has a positive impact on our health and safety and the environment.
Today, almost everything we buy has some sort of a technological component to it. The future of automobiles, of washer and drying machines, will be less about the hardware and more about the technology that operates it. And so businesses have become very clever in embedding technological protection measures that encrypt the ability to maintain and repair the equipment.
So here we have it. When you really listen to Brian May and you listen to Pierre Poilievre, we now have, in very recent history, a lot of people are talking about right to repair, understanding that it's not only just applicable to electronic goods, but also to the automobile that people drive. And stay posted as we await, I guess, the imminent announcement of the federal election. We're going to be reaching out to you and making sure that we understand how to communicate to all of these candidates. We're going to be knocking on your doors, seeking your votes, and making sure that everyone in the automotive aftermarket is able to tell those local candidates, we care about right to repair. We want to make sure we continue to have consumer choice. We need in the aftermarket to continue to have access to the information we need to fix cars. So again, stay posted, and we're going to be able to give you some of these updates in the days and a few weeks to come. Now, I'm going to welcome my good friend, Adrian Scovell. Adrian, good afternoon. Adrian is the president and CEO of the Automotive Retailers Association of Canada. And he's joining me today again to talk about this recent announcement that we saw from the BC government on skilled trades. So good afternoon, Adrian.
Good afternoon, Jeff. We're actually the Automotive Resellers Association of British Columbia. We leave Canada. We leave Canada to you. This is
Sorry for the typo. That's right. So again, thank you for joining me, I guess, from British Columbia this afternoon. It's early afternoon for you, I guess, later in the afternoon for us. So I guess first question for you, Adrian, give us the explanation, the background exactly of what happened during that announcement recently by the BC government.
Well, I guess depending on where you want to start, I mean, it starts in 1951, actually battling this issue, and it's been an on and off one. We've had skilled trade certification in British Columbia, but that was actually taken out by prior governments. We've been fighting for this forever. It's never gone off of our agenda. And with a new changing government back in 2013, we were starting to work with the ITA, who set criteria for the trades here. And the new government, the NDP government change, they picked this up. It's been something that they're interested in. I think that they realize that overall, not everybody is going to be, an engineer or a computer scientist or go to university. And yet that's where the whole sort of post-secondary schooling has been focused for a very long time. And there's a realization that they've actually allowed the trades to deteriorate. And that's basically what's happened. The entire trade system in British Columbia has decayed over the years. There's a realization now that they need tradespeople. And all of the data is showing that we're going to be losing a lot of people, anywhere around from 75 to 100,000 people out of the trades in the near future due to people retiring or going and doing other things. So if we want to have a viable trades industry, they have to do something about it. And skilled trade certification is one of the first things that they've been looking at. And we were pushing very hard for this. So we were invited into a working group that's been working now for about 2 years, intensely, probably about for the last year and a half. And we were able to really get the automotive trades, which they were there, we were pushing, but so were other trades. When we were invited into the working group, we found that the automotive, they were sort of looking at it, but nobody really understood it or taking it seriously. So we've gone from being sort of a bit of a sideline, if you will, all the way to being, they prioritized this actually. They said, well, if the industries need to be skilled, it's got to be automotive trades. That was sort of one of the things they put to the forefront. And then we were moved to the front of the queue. So they're serious about putting us forward. And the actual announcement that came was really they're announcing that they're going to do this. There's about 3-4 years of work ahead of us. There were 10 trades that were flagged as being the first that are going to go through the process and become certified. 3 of them were involved with the automotive trades. So automotive mechanical, automotive collision repair, and heavy duty automotive repair are all front and center. They're going to be pushed through as some of the priorities.
Correct. One interesting point to make here, and this is why I think AI and ARA have got a similar makeup in their membership, is we do have people not only in mechanical but also in collision. And so that was going to be my next question is, who's going to be impacted? And I guess in this case, it's going to be both collision and mechanical, I guess, which is a good thing. And why was it that it appeared that they were not going to include automotive first? Did you get a sense of why they thought they didn't need to?
Yeah, I think although we've been pushing for a long time, I've got 2 ways to look at this, JF, and a little bit reflects on, the change in attitude that we've had here. We were locked in a legal battle with ICBC for a long time, probably the good part of 10 years, and really got nowhere. And it involved the Competitions Bureau, et cetera. And of course, that involved the government because here we're a crown insurer. So I think that really took us away from the real action, if you will. We weren't part of that boardroom meeting that was talking about where things were going. We were still pushing, but we were also always aware of sort of that we weren't quite in the conversation. Once we managed to get those issues with the Competitions Bureau out of the way, it was about 2 weeks later that our chairman got a phone call from the working group saying, would you like to be a part of this working group? And what was interesting is he began to explain who he was and his background, and the government officials said, oh, no, we know who you are. We know your background. We're inviting you in to be a part of this, looking at the initial stages. So I would say that one of the reasons that when we first walked in the room and saw these people seem to have been working for a little while was, a little bit of we'd been at some crossroads. I would say that, we needed to prove, I use sort of the analogy, we needed to prove we can sit at the table and use a knife and fork and, eat with our mouth closed. Once we did that, all of a sudden we found out we went from 0 to the, fully functional within a matter of weeks. I think there was a lesson for us to be learned in that, that we need to synchronize what we want with what government wants. And, if you got some major outstanding legal issues, that's probably what was holding us back.
Right. And said so much about, trying to be collaborative with governments rather than fighting governments. And typically, especially in today's world, and I kind of agree with that, it really is really hard to get your message across if you're perceived to be, not trying to support and work collaboratively, but rather trying to fight. So trying to get a more collaborative approach. Absolutely. So, Adrian, we always talk about, for our trade, for our people, for our industry, it's so important to raise the bar, right? To be perceived as professionals. And, we're definitely fixing, cars that are now really computers on wheels. So I guess it's a good thing to being proactive and be part of. But what do you think is going to mean for the aftermarket in the, I guess, short terms, middle term, and long term in terms of to this announcement from the BC government? What do you think will be the impact?
I think, well, first of all, without a skilled workforce, we're all useless. I mean, what's the point? I mean, your access to information, nobody can implement it. So who cares? The opposite being true too. If you've got skilled labor and they don't have access to the information to fix a vehicle, then there's a cutoff there. So there's a lot of sort of interaction, things sort of that come together with having skilled trade certification. I think that there's a perception in the mind of the general public that a mechanic or a collision repair guy, it's a dirty job. You don't need to be particularly smart to do this thing. You just need to be able to turn a wrench and, swing a hammer. And this is absolutely not the case. And, with the way that vehicles are going, they're really more computers on wheels. I wouldn't be surprised to see a world where you wash your hands in order to go and work on a vehicle versus the other way around. So that world's coming. And there's so much computer technology now in a vehicle and more coming that we need a different kind of person to be in the industry. We need people who understand data analysis and can do those things. There will be less reliance necessarily upon actual physical ability or strength. This is great because it also opens the world up to having more women in the industry, hopefully. So there's so many tie-ins. I think that there's a lot of challenge from the OEs. You and I have chatted about this, one-on-one. We've, our 2 hour, 5 minute chats that we say, oh, I got 10 minutes. Let's talk about them. Never goes that way. But the OEs, I think there's an onslaught from the OEs. They're locking up more and more of the industry. And I think by having skilled trade certification, there's a number of things that link to it. So we have the ITA here, which is a government body, which sets the criteria for what you need to know to be a technician. So that takes, once you've gone through that, it sort of takes one of the bullets out of the OE's guns to say, well, you're not qualified. Well, yes, they are, and they were qualified by the government. Now, if we need to modify what we're doing, that's good. We'll modify it. But I see it being as, being able to attract more people to the industry and be able to give more respect for what they do in the industry. And again, it ties us to government's goals in order to create a stronger economy. So by tying us together, there's a number of things that are going to benefit everybody in the long run, and especially the parts industry and the parts manufacturers and the aftermarket parts manufacturers. I see that as having a big impact on them, because if they're locked out of the equation by the OEs, then everybody's going to have to be buying OE parts, et cetera. So there's so many pieces to it. As I say, we could go on for the next 2 hours just talking about all the links, but there are many.
So, Adrian, we just talked about, the OEMs and the recognitions, and to that point, and that's one thing that we've said a lot here at AIA is, listen, whether you're qualified or not to work on a particular vehicle is something you come from what you've learned, the skills you've acquired, the certification that you have received from government. And obviously, this is not about, you've been certified by the government to work on Ford or GM. And so to that point, we're very supportive of that. But I've also heard people sometimes say, well, will these things lead to higher wages? Will these things lead to a higher level of unionization? of the workforce. Is that something you think is going to be tied into this? Is that a positive, negative? What's your take on this?
Oh yeah, these are very good points, Jeff. Okay, so first of all, higher wages, yes. Now, here's something. We've been, pushing to get, we are under a crown insurer with ICBC here. So they essentially set what those rates are. And, we've been pushing for a long time and working with them in order to get what we feel are reasonable rates. And it really goes from the mechanical industry here is not under the control of ICBC. You see a door rate there from, 150 to 175. The glass industry is 100% pretty much reliant upon ICBC. Their rate from ICBC is $56 an hour. It's ridiculous. They haven't had a serious rate change in years. So we see this, and government did, when they announced it, say it would lead to higher wages. So again, how do we align what we do with what government's up to? Well, government said that it would create more prestige for the industry and create a higher level of performance. And they did say it would result in increased wages. So one of the first working round tables was with regard to the collision repair industry here, which is under ICBC, and they set their door rate. So the first thing that they said, they sort of announced why they were doing this in the round table. They talked about prestige in the industry and raising the bar, but they didn't mention wages. So I did. I said, when you originally announced this, you said one of the goals was increase wages. And they said, well, yes, we believe that that's what it's going to happen. And I said, well, it's not going to happen because guess what? ICBC sets the door rate. They had no idea. It actually stopped the meeting. They nobody had thought that through, right? But I'd seen it coming since the first. So you can see what we were trying to do is say, okay, well, we're 100% behind you, but guess what? You got this big elephant in the room, and until you deal with it. So now government's looking at ICBC and saying, well, is this the case? What happens? So you can see how these things need to be addressed as we move forward. I do see it as being something that will result in higher wages. And this is not a bad thing because it needs to get passed on to the general public too. They need to be aware that, they need to pay, and if there's respect for the trades, there's going to be a reflective price.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And I know for some people in the industry, sometimes it's worrisome to say, well, we have inflations on wages, what does it mean for competitiveness and things like that? But you and I think on the same page here to say it's a good thing. We're now losing great people. They're going to the electrical trade. They're going to the construction trade because of the higher wages and the conditions. So if we want to be competitive against the other skilled trade, I think it's some, that's going to be very positive. And I'll add that the province of Quebec, they're very focused on let's bring some great paying jobs. And quite frankly, we have good paying jobs. So I think it's a great focus for that. I'd like to change gears a bit. I know that some people might find or be intrigued, I guess, to see you and I having a conversation on the same webinar. And for some of you who might not know, there has been some tension in the past between ARA and AIA. But what happened? I'd like to hear your take on what led to us being here today in the same virtual box.
That was my desperation to get to Canada Night at SEMA.
You're invited. Looking forward to have you at AIA Canada Night for sure in November.
Next time we can. Jeff, a little bit. I think that over time, individuals may have got sidetracked as to why we are here. We are here to create a healthy industry. And it's not about power. It's not about who did what. I don't care. It's about creating an environment where entrepreneurs can invest with confidence and thrive. That's what we're looking at doing here, and looking at supporting those the workforce that's out there. So once you take your eyes off of the silly games and who's in charge of what and who's doing what and what political, it really doesn't matter. And I think you and I, when we very first met, that's sort of what I was sharing with you is I'm I can be a tremendous influence here. We've got very, very good representation in British Columbia. I was chatting with you earlier about a minister attending, Minister Farnworth. I mean, Secretary, the
Parliamentary assistant.
Sorry. It'll come to me in a second. Solicitor General. There we go. I was thinking of somebody else, Andrew Mercier. But he's a very senior, probably 1-2 underneath the premier here. Attended our strategic planning session. So we've really elevated to whom we speak. What I see as an opportunity here in British Columbia for us, we've got a fairly engaged and progressive government here. If we can start to set precedent here, then the AIA can take that across Canada. And that only bolsters our industry. So I'm not interested in having control over the whole of Canada for all these different aspects of industry. I'm only interested, or primarily interested in, doing that for British Columbia. Although we formed certain alliances. We call it the Western Alliance, particularly with Manitoba and Saskatchewan, because they have government-controlled Crown insurance there. But for you and I think it was just a matter of us sitting down and sort of resetting the clock, if you were, and saying, look, we've got the same objectives here. Working against each other is completely stupid. We should really be working together and respecting each other's boundaries. And I think for me, it started out there. And then in talking with you, it quickly became clear we've got the same objective. Yeah. So let's help each other.
Yeah. Allow me to draw a parallel, I guess, to this, Adrian. And to your point, when you start talking, what you realize, we often have much more in common, that we have areas where we may agree to disagree. In fact, we haven't found too many areas as to disagree. Different perspective, different approach, but essentially the same goals in the same direction. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, Adrian, for this openness to look forward, to find common grounds, support. And I know you've been a supporter of the Your Car, Your Data, Your Choice campaign. And for many stakeholders, this didn't go unnoticed. So what's next for ARA and yourself in regards to skilled trades? The announcement is made. It's going to be a 3-year cycle. You're going to have to work with the government. We're not sure exactly what that regulatory body is going to be. And I could tell you, we've been very close to the Ontario Colleges of Trade here in Ontario, OCOT, which took years to put together, was disbanded after the fact. So I'm not sure what you foresee for your engagement with government and what they're going to do next.
It starts to align things again. The strategy really is to align what we're doing with what the government wants and then point them in the direction we want them to go. It's much easier to work that way. So we talk about lobbying a little bit, and you were mentioning Your Car, Your Data, Your Choice. There's do we say, we have the CASIS agreement with NADA. Do we say, okay, no, we want a voluntary agreement, so therefore we're going to work against the AIA and what they're up to with Your Car, Your Data, Your Choice? That is just a ridiculous position to have. When we worked with you and I obviously had several conversations, Jeff. I've got good connections here, so I was able to get radio airtime. So why wouldn't I go and do that? And it points the OEs to the fact that, we could have a voluntary agreement if you want one, but if you don't, guess what? There's this alternative over here. So the objective, if we agree the objective is to get access to information, how we get it is irrelevant. I don't care if it's, legislated. In fact, if it's legislated, great, I'll be there with you. So when we look at where we're moving and the strategy that we're using with government, when it gets to lobbying, the way I would share it would be, the louder you're speaking, the worse you're doing. So if you're standing on the legislature lawn with a bullhorn and a sign, guess what? You're not getting anywhere, nowhere. You're not going to change minds that way. The lobbying, the word is in, the answer is in the word, the lobby. Yeah, you see, you'll be in the lobby of the legislature, or you'll be in one of the meeting rooms on the lower level, but you're not really making decisions. You're talking to low-level managers whose job it is to reinforce policy. The only way you really get there is to be invited. You have to be invited in. And then you'll find yourself on the top talking to people in a boardroom who actually make decisions. So what this is doing, the skilled trade certification, it's going to be a 3 to 4 year process. I actually really like that because it puts us right in that room for the next 3 to 4 years with whomever the ministers responsible are. So there's a huge win already in that. And we're already seeing it, by the way. There's spill-off projects that are coming on the sidelines that we're yet to really sort of talk about, but they're already happening. So that brings us into that room. Now, here we have the ITA, which sets the criteria for education as far as skilled trades is concerned. It puts us in the room with them. It puts us in the room with BCIT, which is the largest educator in the field. So we get some influence there as well. When we come out with some certification level at the end of it, we've got access to those skilled people going through the trades, and we can become the people that are conduit to apprenticeships. So we become that body. And then we start to look at, do we now represent individual people, technicians, as members of the AIA? By getting that all in alignment, and you heard what I was talking about earlier about having actually government talk to ICBC about, hey, you guys aren't paying them enough. This isn't going to work. Because we're all in a part of that, we've got a voice. Now, we can bring your car, your data, your choice. We can bring access to information into the conversation because we're going to be able to say, look, this is great. This guy's got a ticket. Guess what? Can't fix a car because the computer won't tell him what's wrong with it. Why not? Because the OEs won't let him. Why not? Because it's not even controlled in Canada, by the way. So but if we were to go and we were just wanted to do this, we'd be on the legislature lawn with a bullhorn and a sign saying, let us have access to this information. So the strategy, really, there's a lot more to it. Then I think you and I working together, particularly Jeff, this is an opportunity for us to build a precedent where all the pieces come together and we can package it up and go, well, why isn't this the case in other provinces across the country?
Absolutely. Well, listen, Adrian, this has been tremendous amount of information. We're going to be obviously at AIA here to support you in those actions and to moving forward, continue to collaborate. Looking forward to have a drink with you at SEMA Apex at Canada Night, if we could all manage to travel to Las Vegas in early November. I know that we've sold much of the sponsorship already. There's a big interest. So as long as the borders are open and we're able to safely travel, I think many of us are going to be looking forward to grab a drink on the strip, and looking forward again to have you in real life there. And obviously next will be to continue to collaborate and advance obviously the interest of our industry and the people that work in the automotive aftermarket across Canada. Again, on behalf of everyone here at AIA and myself, Adrian, I wanted to thank you very much for joining us today, and maybe we'll have to reconnect and continue on this topic of skilled trade at a later time. Thanks again, Adrian.
Thanks for your time, Jeff. It was good to see you again.
You betcha. Our next executive update will be on Tuesday, September 14, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, as always. Our guest will be David Coletto from Abacus Data. David is basically polling, or Abacus Data is polling Canadians regularly about their intent to vote, what's going on with the election. But we've also recently asked David to ask the same Canadians about their cars, how to get its service, what's their perspective on right to repair, and find out whether or not Canadians would support legislation on right to repair. So please join me next month to listen to David and learn more about the results of his surveys and research. And until then, well, take care.